Alright guys, this is going to be video 2 for your notes for U.S. history. We're now picking back up with superficial prosperity. So many Americans believe prosperity in the 1920s would last forever, and as we know, the Great Depression is coming. So we're looking at producing great quantities of goods. The 1920s was able to produce a lot. That's a large part, and thanks to World War I. So the 1920s were able to produce a lot of products, and businesses expanded. Companies began to merge as well, so you have a lot of consolidation of companies like auto companies, steel companies, electrical equipment companies. So more production, businesses expanded, companies began to merge like autos, steel, electrical equipment, so forth. You also begin to see chain stores like a Walgreens, chain stores where you have multiple stores of the same kind of company. So a lot of drugstores, banks, they were some of the first chain stores. Five and dimes. Have you ever heard of five and dimes? It's a nickel and a dime store. Those are popular, as well as like places like Walgreens. Anyway, Woolworths. Have you ever heard of that place as well? Woolworths is another popular chain store. But America's wealth was very poorly distributed, and that's one thing. That's a big theme of the 20s. We're going to talk more about as we get to the Great Depression. That the rich were getting richer, while everybody's income was increasing. The income of the wealthy dramatically increased versus the lower to middle class people. So everybody's wages were going up, but the upper classes were getting way higher, way faster. Anyway, so America's wealth was being poorly distributed, and there was no government regulation at all to prevent that from happening. No minimum wage, nothing like that. Industrial wages rose slower than corporate salaries. So industrial wages rose slower than corporate salaries. So a wealth gap was growing. Farmers' wages declined and grew in debt with falling prices. So farmers' wages declined and grew in debt with falling prices. Farmers' wages declined and grew in debt with falling prices. Farmers were one of the biggest groups that struggled throughout the 1920s. That after the World War I, they had dramatically increased their levels of production. So after the war, when the amount of food they were producing wasn't no longer needed, they were kind of stuck with a ton of extra equipment they were in debt for because of the war, but also a lot of extra crop they were producing. So their prices dropped pretty low once all the wartime demand went away. And so throughout the 1920s, the government doesn't do anything to help them, and so the farmers during the 1920s really struggle, because they're not getting any kind of help at all whatsoever. And that's the one group of the 1920s that doesn't do well at all whatsoever. So farmers' wages declined and grew in debt with falling prices. Iron and railroad industries also declined. Railroads have been one of the biggest employers and one of the biggest companies for some time now, and railroads began to decline as well as steel manufacturing too. Okay. So now we're going on to buying goods on credit, looking at buying goods on credit. This is a big theme for why you have the Great Depression occur. To help fuel consumerism, and that's a term you want to be familiar with the 1920s, is consumerism. Consumerism is very big in the 1920s, consumerism. And sometimes this has been a question on the EOC between the 20s and 50s. Both decades are marked by people buying a lot of things. People are getting a lot of extra income, and companies are encouraging people to buy a lot of extra goods. So consumerism is a very big theme. And what companies would let you do is buy things on credit. So companies would let you buy things on credit to make extra money. So companies let you buy things on credit to make extra money. To be able to buy extra goods with your money you had. What they would do is they would offer installment plans. They would offer what's something referred to as installment plans. So what that means is, just like now, if you want to go buy furniture at a store, you can't afford, $2,000 furniture or whatever the case is. So they let you buy in increments. Like you go put, $50 down a month, whatever the case is. Well, in the meantime, they're also charging you interest, so it's a lot of extra money. Well, back then they didn't have any kind of credit system. There wasn't credit scores like they do now. So you would have stuff like you would go buy a car, or refrigerator, whatever the case is, because everybody was buying stuff. So you feel like you had to buy stuff too. So you would buy a bunch of stuff that you couldn't necessarily afford, and so people were buying cars, refrigerators, appliances, all on credit. You see advertisements for an iron that costs like $3.50. People could buy it on credit. It's crazy stuff like that. So people would buy these things on credit, and they would just rack up a lot of debt. And then lo and behold, as time goes on, they couldn't pay off their debts as the bills began to roll in. And so the companies themselves were producing too much because they were producing based on the demand of credit. But people actually bought the things they could afford, they wouldn't have had that problem. So installment plans make consumers buy with small down payments and then pay off the rest of their debt in regular monthly payments. They would have slogans like "enjoy while you pay." So many companies encourage people to do installment plans. Some economists, not many, but some economists at the time worried about the effects this could have on the economy, but people didn't listen, and so that's going to be a behavior throughout the 20s as people are buying more and more items they can't necessarily afford on credit because everybody assumed the economy was just going to keep getting better, and better. Okay, I'm just going to touch real fast on rural and urban differences, and that's where we're going to stop these notes just to kind of get that part done. The 1920 census reported for the first time more Americans were living in urban areas. So for the first time in the 1920s, more Americans were living in urban areas, not rural areas. So we finally made the transition off of rural farms. What's also developing is more cultural and social divide in America. Urban Americans liked consumer products and leisure activities of cities. So urban Americans like consumer products and leisure activities of cities. Whereas they're also, the urban areas were more open to social change as well. So urban areas were more open to social change and scientific discoveries, meaning that they were okay reading the Bible and going to church and also understanding science, things like evolution. They didn't have to just believe only what the Bible said. A lot of folks refer to this as modernism, that they accepted science and religion as the same. So a lot of them refer to this as modernism, accepting science and religion as the same. Most rural folks emphasize strong moral values and traditional view of religion, science, and culture. So most rural folks emphasize strong moral values, traditional view of religion, science, and culture. So most rural folks without formal education, most rural folks emphasize strong moral values and traditional view of religion, science, and culture. In rural areas, formal education was not that emphasized because of farming needs. Urban areas, education was much more emphasized. So in rural areas, like country areas, they didn't emphasize going to college, whereas urban areas they did. So it was seen in more vital success, but that's going to be a big theme of the 1920s, is you have a big divide between the rural population, who's more traditional, more religious-based, more Bible believers, Bible's 100% true, whereas the urban areas are more open to new ideas and more open to social changes, women having more equality, those kind of things. Okay, so we're going to stop the second video there, and I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.